Afternoon, everyone. I want to just welcome everyone to the City of Rock Board of Directors agenda meeting as we schedule set the agenda for November 19, 2024. I want to welcome those that are watching online and streaming, as well as those here in the audience. Members of the board, as we look through tonight's agenda, there's a deferral of item number 25, and that'll be taken back up on December the 3rd, 2024. Any questions on items 1 through 16? Director Adcock?
Yes, I would like to have a report on item number 2. I would like to have some information on the 14 and item number 16.
All right. Director Honeywell, item number 2.
Kevin.
That's me, Mayor.
Sorry about that, Kevin.
Yes, it's the Bridge to Work program that we have, and it currently runs through Public Works, so you're correct in that standpoint. But since we move homeless services to the Department of Housing and Neighborhood Programs, we're taking over, making sure that we do the administration part of it. I do have Paul here today, and he can come up and talk about what we actually do.
Good evening. Good to see y'all. Good to see you. Director Adcock, what specific questions do you have?
Well, I think this is a wonderful program, but I would like to know how many people were
Certainly.
having participate. And I
Certainly.
would like to know what all areas are we picking up? And is it certain areas in town? Because I get a number of telephone calls from people in other areas. So do we spread it out, or what determines where do they pick up?
We pick up based on 311 response or requests. So whatever the 311 response requests that go through the Public Works, we have our contact, and she just tells us, go here, go there. And if it's not every ward, then it's pretty darn close. I haven't looked at the map, honestly. So I can give you some. We've cleaned 190 sites. Some of them we may have cleaned more than once, repeat offenders. Put in 4,320 hours and taken 3,798 bags of trash off the city streets. So those are our numbers as far as outcomes.
How many people do we have that participates?
We have, I got all these numbers for the numbers of referrals and contacts that we've made with people for improving their lives. And if you just want to take 8 times 24 times 52 or 49, that'll give you the number of.
For those people who don't know where you pick up, do you still have pickup sites?
We have not used going around and picked up panhandlers in a while because we've just gotten so many people that come to Canvas in the mornings and are ready to go to work. I think one time in the last year we had to go to Jericho and try to find some extra workers. So, I mean, the people that want to participate in this program know what we're doing, and they come to us to be part of that. We've also started a component where about 3 of the 8 that we take out every day can be in a job readiness component, and they work with us every day for a month. Every day that we work, that is, 3 days a week. And they work on different other job readiness skills, like putting their resume together, making sure they've got all their employment documents, social security card, birth certificate, et cetera. And they also go to classes on interviewing skills, getting along with coworkers, getting rent ready, tweaking your resume, getting those things together so that they can be able to go and find a full-time job if that's what they're really looking for. So,
Can you give us your address so that if people meet someone that they would like to refer?
sure. 1111 West 7th Street is our address, and it's Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. Be there between 7:30 and 8. We pick the names at random so that we're not picking favorites or not picking favorites or whatever. We just try to be as fair as we can with the spots that we have available. People can work every other week, so that spreads it out. If any morning, those mornings, you want to go down and James will build you a cup of coffee, and you can see the 30 to 40 people that are all excited to try to get to work if they can. So we can't work everybody. We could work more people if that were, the will of the board to try to expand it or think about making it bigger. That could be
Thank
figured
you.
out. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Director, Yeah. Director Miller?
I think so. Thanks, Mayor. I'll wait till you get through with that. Mayor had a question about number 6, so I'll let everybody finish.
Vice Mayor Webb?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Scott, and thank you for being here. I'm glad Director Adcock raised this, and this summer when I was in Indianapolis, I saw a lot of people who were working in the downtown area, and there were people who were working the same day every day. And after being there several days, I got into a conversation with one of the individuals who was working. And so you touched on that we have 30 to 40 people in the job readiness aspect of it. What would it take? I mean, I don't know if, have you all thought about looking for grants that would help bolster our ability to let people work more frequently? The folks I talked to in Indianapolis were working every day.
Every day. Yeah. I would just have to put a pin to it and get with our team and figure out what we needed to do to make that happen.
Yeah, thank you.
And some of the questions that Director Adcock asked you, could you send us that information to Ashley or Emily or somebody? Because I think our residents would like to see that and know about it. I'm really glad to hear about the new aspects of it today. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I mean, we've also had 23 folks in the last year get jobs. I know for a fact that they didn't all keep those jobs, but that's a start. We've referred and engaged people, 171 folks in workforce readiness, job employment services, and as far as other services, 44 folks have been actively referred for addiction treatment, 70 for physical health. We've assisted people, 23 folks with legal issues. That may have been me putting my clergy collar on and going to court with them, or calling and figuring out some different legal issues. We've gotten health insurance for 51, bus passes for 141, helped 40 people get their ID documents, and referred 33 for mental health care. So
That's great. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Director Phillips?
Thank you, Mayor. Mine was also on a different item, so if there's more for this, I would defer.
Director Pack?
Thanks, Paul, so much. That's so exciting. Do we have 2 vans now or 3?
We have one.
We only have 1 van.
One van.
I thought we had a second.
I think you'd bought one, but that was not very good, so we just used the one, unless
We
it's.
bought a bad van. But
Yeah, neither one of the vans that were purchased for Bridge to Work, they were functional, but they're not the fancy ones.
But if we could find a van, you could get more people.
If we had another van, if we had some other things and increased the budget to provide for those things, yes, we could figure out a way to expand it if that was the.
Well, that's good to know, because I thought it was 2, and I actually thought we might have 3 now. But I agree, if you could share this information with us. I talk about this program a lot. I know, I cannot express my gratitude to you and your team. I know you could do more if you had more. So if you'd share that with us, I would appreciate it.
Will do.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Director Miller?
Thanks, Mayor. My question is on resolution number 6. about sidewalks that are gonna be built 24th, 25th Street and Scott. Was this taken from a list and was this going down? It was something that was approved? Because I get a request for sidewalks all the time, and I'm trying to figure out how this one got selected. And for all I know, I probably approved the thing. I don't remember. But can you tell me, was this from a list that was first come, first serve, or how did this one get selected?
Director Mel, I honestly don't remember exactly how this, but I'm sure it's from one of the lists you're referring to where we have requests for repairing sidewalks, and this one is one that was selected. I can research that and get back with you on exactly why this one was
Okay.
done under this contract.
Yeah, just please, because if I get one phone call about sidewalks, I get 100. And
Yes,
so I don't remember talking about this one, but like I said, for all I know, I probably approved it maybe a couple of years or so ago. I don't, so
Yes, sir.
just when you get a chance, just let me know how long it was on the list, when it got selected, that type thing, so I can maybe have some idea of how these things work.
Yes, sir. I'll do
All
that.
right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Director Miller. All right. Director Phillips.
And Mayor, this is on, I think, number 15. Is that the ambassadors one? 16. And I just wanted to confirm for the public, I know it's on the agenda, it's listed as 500,000 from the city. But if I understood what's been presented to us, we're gonna repeat what we did last year, where the city does 250 and
Correct.
CVB does 250, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want the public to be aware of that.
I think Director Adcock had a question about that too.
No, I had a question about number 14 and number 16.
That's all I had, Mayor.
All right, number 16,
Number 14.
14.
Okay. It looks like that we're taking money away from sidewalks and using it for public safety salaries. So could you explain, like Director,
So,
we have so many requests for sidewalks, why are we taking money away from sidewalks?
yes, ma'am. So if you'll recall that this city board voted a couple months ago, a month ago, as we are approaching American Rescue Plan Act dollar, obligation deadlines, we voted to, and we have the ability through the regulation, is to transfer any allocations that haven't been fully funded or obligated yet into the general fund, and from that process, and so that's what we're doing.
So we'll still be funding sidewalks. This is a cleanup item related to the Rescue Plan Act.
So we have no more sidewalks to fund?
Well, the board set aside, I believe this line item was about $200,000 for sidewalks. And there's a portion of it that has not been obligated yet. And so this will help us meet all the ARPA deadlines.
Okay. Okay.
All right, you said number 16,
Yes, number 16.
and what's your question?
I would like to have some information about the ambassador program, how it's working, how many do we have, and which blocks are they in.
We'll get you a report for that.
Okay, thank you.
Director Hines?
Mayor, mine's on 17 when we get to planning development.
We're with you.
All right, before I get into my questions, I'm gonna point out to staff, and I'm not even sure, it's gonna take some talking me off the ledge before I even decide I want to engage in this conversation today. So, to our staff members, when you guys produce a memo to us that comes in our packets, for a lot of us, that's the only information we get on an item. And so, I want to point out some just on the memo itself. There's a note, it says fiscal impact none determined. Well, we spent $348,000 or $350,000 on this, so I would call that a fiscal impact. We've already determined there's an extra cost to stakeholders and developers. That's a fiscal impact. I'm not exactly sure if that means there's no fiscal impact to the city going forward unless you determine that implementation of this keeps us from being able to develop, and that would long-term reduce our tax base. So that. The other glaring error is on the recommendation. Staff recommends approval. The Planning Commission voted to recommend approval by a vote of 4 ayes and 6 nays and 1 absent. That is not a recommendation of approval. That is a recommendation of disapproval. And I also want to know in the notes why the Planning Commission did not recommend approval. And I can tell you why, because there was no determination of fiscal impact on anything that was presented to them. Let me go, I've got a couple other notes. I find it interesting that post-construction stormwater management, part of this is required by statewide in our SWPPP statewide. It's supposed to be in every single stormwater manual. So why it's being added and it hasn't been in ours, I'm kind of curious about. Then when you get to the very end of it, background, it says adoption of the new manual will require implementation for all projects in January 2025. That's just not true. For one, I know there's been meetings had with ADEQ. They have told us, to staff and other private parties interested, that they would be more than glad to grant us an extension of anywhere from 3 months to 6 months. I'm still hearing from stakeholders, people impacted by this potential changes in our stormwater manual, that there may have been one small concession made, but there is by far not a consensus agreement on this. And that's before I even get into the nuts and bolts after we do the presentation. So I just want to understand that Half and Associates and Brad, you're swimming upstream with me right now. And I'm not happy about anything that's occurred, the process. I know, Brad, you've inherited this, but I am at the point I don't even want to put this on our agenda for discussion next week. One, I want to hold it separate if it is. I don't know why on God's earth this would be thought by staff to be something that wasn't going to have an objection and should be put in a grouped items, but I want it held separate at the very, very least. And then I'll give my opinion once we have the presentation from Half, which I see we have. So this should be an interesting discussion. I'll save the rest of my questions for after we hear the presentation, Mayor.
Director Webb.
Thank you, Mayor, and mine's on item 22, so when we get to item 22, I'd like to have a presentation, please.
Right. Director Adcock, or you took your? On 19. We are. I'm getting to it. I'm just trying to get through the agenda. Well, I understand it's probably going to be a longer item, so I want to get through the business. Director Phillips?
I was just making sure whether we were having a presentation or not on stormwater, so I'm good, Mayor.
All right. Any questions on items 2021? All right. 19.
Thank you, Board, Mayor. Number 19, Z8911-A. The applicant requests to rezone the .53 acre property from PCD to revised PCD to allow the continued expanded use of the property for retail and mobile canteen unit uses. This is located in Ward 2. Planning Commission voted 8 yes, 0 no, and 2 absent. Staff recommended denial on this. They want to continue to use the property as, I think they have 1 food truck there right now. They'd like to continue to use it, a permanent food truck, add a permanent food truck to that, and also continue using the storage container as a retail space. And the office, there's a mobile manufactured home that says office, and that's just storage. I'm not really sure how many violations had been recorded, but this came about as an enforcement item.
It has reported this time and time again, because it is nothing but a junk dealer. And it's right across the street from the elementary school, which is one of our nicer elementary schools on Little Rock, and with lots of parents participating in it. And I see you have said denial, and I completely agree with that. Ward 2 doesn't deserve something like this right there in the middle where we've repaired the streets. The school is a wonderful school, and across the street you have this junk dealer. So I completely agree with you on this one.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. What? Don't you want it separate? Yes, I want to keep it separate. I'm sorry. I was looking down my next one.
Director Adcock, are you finished with this item?
Yes, I'm finished.
But you want to have it, we'll hold it separate.
And I want it separate, yes.
Okay, I think we still have a couple of additional questions on the first items before we move to the other one. Director Phillips, did you have?
No, I just wanted to know if we were having a presentation, so I'm good, and I'll wait till
And
after.
I don't think we can answer that right this second till some people get back.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't know if that's it.
Any other questions for Director Jordan?
Director,
Do you have a question, Director Wyrick?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
It's a different item. It's number 20. Can you give me a presentation on item 20?
Sure. Number 20, Z9121-A. The applicant requests to rezone the 2.50 acre property from R2 to PDR to allow a 6-lot, single-family residential subdivision. This is a second phase of an already approved PDR. Those will have 6 lots total. 5 of them will be for sale. There's a larger lot. If you look at at the sketch, there's a larger lot, Lot 9, that will be reserved by the owner. I believe that they're going to build their own home there. These will be single-family homes. The access will be from the already constructed Phase 1. Setbacks will be 25 feet front and back and 8 on the sides.
So I got kind of confused. It says 1 or 2 family dwellings, which made me think maybe these they could be single-family homes or they could be duplexes.
I asked about today, it'll be single-family homes.
Okay, that's under, I don't know what part that's under. It's under the utilities, fire department, parks, county planning, and it's goes down to 1 or 2 family residential developments. So this is single family homes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and Lot 9 is going to be single family as well.
Yes, the owner, the way I understand it, the owner of the property, the developer, is reserving that lot for themselves.
Okay, I was thinking duplex is what I was thinking.
No.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Director Adcock, what item?
Item 22, I would like additional information sent to us. Of course, it's already separate, but I would like information sent to us so that we can be prepared for the discussion on this item.
And I had asked to get a presentation on this item.
Today.
Nick's here.
And we know that we're still holding one other thing that we're going to go back to, but until that time, we'll move ahead and get this presentation on item 22. Thank you.
Yep, so item 22 is a budget amendment for the fiscal year 24 budget, updating the budget revenues across the board for the various funds based on activity we've seen through June, and then adjusting expenses accordingly as well based off of unspent fund balance from last year for certain items, additional costs for different activities, and then our vacancy savings, actually getting that approved, which we adjust each pay period, but we have to bring it to the board for your approval to update the budgets.
And will you comply with Director Adcock's request and send us a detailed presentation?
I want detailed information
this
on this.
before next week.
What's the question?
We're on.
22.
Yep, we will get you what makes up the numbers.
Okay.
On the street fund?
I would like paper copies of it.
Yeah, just.
So we'll get paper copies of the board communication. Is that what you, I think that has everything we'll need. We'll get that to you tonight.
Okay.
I tried to print it, but my ink ran out.
Oh, but just so I'm aware, copies of what for 22?
The board communication for item 22, the budget amendment.
Oh, okay, great, okay. Thank you.
Nick, I have a quick question for you if I can, Mayor.
Sorry, I stepped out.
This is a little bit off topic, but while you're here, I know Friday, we had a report about our sales tax projection, which was, I think, 1.6. And I think I asked you a question on Friday about what do we project for next year, and I think you said flat or 1%. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What does that translate to in actual dollars estimate? Is that a little less than 3 million?
It's about 1.5, 1.
Okay. So less than 2 million is the projected income that we would have from 25 that will be different from 24.
Correct.
Okay. That's what I wanted to understand. I know we had all our department directors here, and we're trying to figure out $46 million in need, and we only got $2 million, less than $2 million.
That's just from
sales tax.
Sales tax. There's
Yeah.
other increases from property
Right.
taxes from those values, and then franchise fees as well.
Understood. Understood. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that. So thank you. Thank you,
No
Nick.
problem.
Thanks, Mayor.
All right, anything on items? You want to press it, Director Adcock, you got a question? Okay. Director Wyrick, do you have a question?
Mine was on 20.
All right.
Yeah.
Brad, if you come back for 20?
No, I'm done.
Oh, you
Already,
get- all right.
I'll do this
I've
again.
already done it.
All right, so items, questions on 24, 25, or 26? Before and that'll be the end, and then we'll go back to item regarding stormwater. Any questions on items 24, 25, 26 before we end with the stormwater? Any questions on items 24, 25, 26? Brad, if you'll come address some of Director Hines' concerns.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. And Director Hines, that was the memo, that was a typo. We do apologize for saying it was approved by the Planning Commission. It was not approved by the Planning Commission. We presented this to you all a couple of months ago. I think it was the first time it was on you all's agenda. At that time, you asked that we go back and we engage with some of the stakeholders that are in the city that this would be directly affecting. We did that with the help, thankfully, with the help of with the Little Rock Chamber, and then we started just having meetings ourselves after that. We probably met 6 times in that time period, whether it was with a larger group. We met at AEDQ once. We've met at our department a few times. Just trying to work through all of these points that are in our stormwater drainage manual. There are things that we were able to compromise on. There are also things that we weren't able to compromise on. But there was a lot of information that we put forth at first, and then just talking to everyone, we reevaluated. And Miles from HAF is here, and he'll come up and he'll present some of the findings, some of the concessions, and some of the compromises that we've made, and some that we haven't made. But again, we have to think about this in terms of the future. This is not just a 5-year, 10-year thing. This could be a 40-year thing. So how do we want the next 40 years to go? here in the city. So I'll let Miles come up and,
And before we go there, because I do know Director Hines is gonna have a number of different questions. I know this has come up. Walk the board through the timing. I know we talked about this before, then there were some meetings since then before half comes up, because I wanna maybe Director Hines address the timing here, and that's not gonna mitigate any questions that you have, but may cut down in our timing today, because I know we got a schedule. But on the timing, let's start there from your perspective before we give half
Sure.
to Director Hines to ask questions.
sure, we have, and our deadline is December 31st, 2024. So we will be past the deadline New Year's Day. This was something that we had agreed to do in this permit period, something that we agreed to do 5 years ago.
Let me ask you this, and I think we discussed this before, that you are completing what was already approved 5 years ago, and part of that approval is to complete it 5 years after.
Yes.
Can there be a delay?
We have, when we met with AEDQ, they did say that we could have an extension on this. I spoke with them this morning, and I spoke with Ms. Wessel, and she said that we could again have an extension. I asked her what is the percentage that would be approved if we did request that. She said 100%.
That it would be? Or
It would be, that our extension would be approved. She said it could, the latest that they could do it is 3 months.
So here's what I would suggest, or not suggest, direct, is let's do an extension. I think Director Hines will concur with that, and other members of the board. So we'll do an extension. Address whatever concerns Director Hines directed towards your department. I know one of them was addressed through the typo.
Okay.
In an email to the board. Get that to the acting city manager,
Yep.
some type of briefing. If there's any other corrections beside the typo, I can't remember them all. But in the meantime, go ahead and request, per the concurrence and counsel, Director Hines, who's been, and I'm saying his name, Director Phillips. I'm joking. It's an inside joke if you guys didn't watch the budget meeting. I'm saying Director Hines' name because he's been really involved in the process, as well as Director Wyrick. I'm gonna look over here at Director Wyrick. She has
She
too.
has.
But if you'll just go ahead and request that, so you say that buys us 3 months? Okay. So in 3 months, we should be able to figure out a compromise.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Is there a time that you'd like to come back to the board? I mean,
We got to beat that deadline. So if it's 3 months from the deadline is December 31st, so that's March 31st. Is it 31?
Yeah, 30.
No, it's from December.
And it, so, yeah, so yeah, January 1st
Yeah.
to the
March
end,
31st.
March 31st.
Changed and then sent where it's supposed to go.
Okay.
That's a good idea, Director Wyrick.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Half? Oh, well, we're still going with Director Hines, but we'll go to Director Cabeers. You got a question?
When we do this for 2 months, are you going to involve Lance or BJ or both of them in trying to help find this compromise?
Absolutely. I mean,
Well,
Director Wyrick has been.
yeah, I'm gonna be clear. Director Wyrick has been in certain meetings. I don't know if Director Hines has been in any meetings, but they can't be in meetings together.
That's why I said either or, but I think that if we're gonna come back in 2 months, and I agree with what BJ is saying, the wisdom would be to have one of them
Mhm.
there to help craft what we need to craft, because then you have a consensus of a board member who says that I'm on board, rather than coming back and saying, now we're gonna start from point zero again, which is what we're doing tonight, which is never a good thing.
Director Wyatt? Director Wyatt, just press.
I love these buttons. I have met with this group several times, and we've done our best to try to answer questions. There's been compromises along the way, and I think there is a issue with the difference between what this permit is supposed to do and what is left out there to be fixed or repaired. This stormwater, this MS4, only addresses new construction. It doesn't address the world. And one of the persons that has met with us objects to the fact that it only addresses initial construction and it doesn't go back and fix the rest of the city. And we all know, we tried to pass a sales tax that could have helped with some of the issues that are out there in the city today, and it didn't. So going back to fix everything that's wrong in the city would be billions of dollars in regards to drainage. So there's an objection on the front end that this only addresses new construction. And the MS4 permit is 5 years old. We should have already had our plans together as to how we're going to do it. We said we were going to do something, but we didn't say how we were going to do it. Now we have a way to do it, and I'm just not sure what a delay is going to do for us because we've got that rub between new construction and existing construction. So having said that, I'm happy for Lance to work with the group, and I'll step aside so he can get his questions answered. But I'm confident that we've moved forward and made compromises, and we're at the best place that we could be at right now. And I think when Miles goes through the presentation, you'll be able to see that. Thank you.
Director Hines, then Director Phillips.
Well, the only issue I'll take with that is that today we get this stormwater manual update presentation. There evidently is a new, I guess, revised ordinance, but that is yet to be given to any of the stakeholders that were in those meetings. And it's time-stamped that this was delivered to us, I guess, on the 8th, or the presentation was completed on the 8th. So that's, it's hard to say we're on board with something when nobody's seen what we're supposedly on board with. And I can tell you that the preliminary look over this from the stakeholders that I've talked to is that they're not on board. And so, and I would agree with you that unless this is some backdoor way to stop development in our city, if it only applies to new construction or new development, I'm interested in the metrics of why we picked 1 acre when somebody could come in and do 2.9 acre developments and not have any of that apply, but it's a total acreage of 1.8. Seems pretty arbitrary on some of the methodology we've done. The biggest concern for me is the impact's the same reason Planning Commission decided not to approve it was there was no estimation or look at the actual cost of implementation. And if your intent is to stop development, new construction in the city, this will probably do it. And, you can call me, I'm running around with my hair on fire on this, but the people who do development in our city every day know what the cost of doing business with. They know what it costs to do development in this city. And what they're telling me is, and they've looked at recent projects, that if all of this is implemented, there's a go, no-go financially when you look at doing development. Commercial, residential, and essentially the residential developments are commercial in nature because that's how they do their business. So they end up residential, but it's a commercial operation. So I'm interested to see what HAF has. I've got some questions. I want some production of documents. I will go through what I want from our contract for professional services on the deliverables, and I want those before we proceed. There's a lot of reasons to tap the brakes. The permit we have, if we don't have a new permit in place, and ADEQ grants us a permit, we'll continue on until we have a new permit in place from ADEQ. ADEQ doesn't even have, I think part of the reason they're not worried about it too, is they don't even have our new permit ready to go. You know, and I'll point out some things that, part of the new permitting process is we don't have to start enforcing this on day one. We can put in our new permit that we will phase it in. It is left to our own methodologies and the path we choose. AEDQ has made that clear to all of us, everybody that's in the meetings. This is all self-imposed. These stormwater manuals are self-imposed by the cities that create them. ADEQ and the EPA give a lot of latitude, and I think we'll get into discussion on certain methodologies that for some reason only 2 methodologies were suggested when EPA offers 20 methodologies for how to get to the same end of the road. And that's why I think there's a need for pause to continue working on this. Again, and this continues to happen, and I don't know how to break the cycle, but the fact that we've had 5 years to do this and we wait till the last year and a half to do it, it should have been a process that was started immediately. If that's what our permit required, we should have been working on it from day one of this permit cycle, and we didn't. And that's shame, you know, that's one of those shame on you, shame on me moments. You know, the old adage is bite me once, shame on you, bite me twice, shame on me. This is a shame on you from a staff level, and I'm not gonna have a shame on me moment going forward. And that's what I'm trying to put forth. So I'm interested to hear the presentation, and I've got some questions already pre-programmed, and I'll probably make notes and we can have further discussion. Thank you.
Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, my question, a couple of them are logistically. If we're going to get the extension to March 31st and with a new deadline for y'all to present to us on February 1st or thereabout, first Tuesday in February,
Right.
Are we still having a presentation today? Is that still, we're still doing that? I'm asking, I don't know.
I would like to have a presentation because I haven't seen any of the new. I had what we had last time. I haven't seen what's new.
Just for the record, Brad, when did this process start? I just want to make sure.
2021, Miles?
So I want, Director Hines, I appreciate everything you shared. I want to make sure, because I also don't want to discredit the staff and the hours that they spent alongside the, you know, the consultant, whether folks like the consultant or not. This process has been going on for 3 years, correct?
Yes, sir.
I'm just
gonna, the facts on the contract was not executed until December of 2022 on what we are looking at. And they may have been working on it.
So
All I'm
again,
telling you is,
but for you to say, again, we're not definitely not trying to argue, but I'm not gonna have it on the record that it just started, because it didn't. It started in 21, procured in 22. We're here now in 24, and we're gonna ask for, based on your guidance and counsel, which we're agreeing to, is have an extension. But this process has been going on for 3 years. And what we have is, because we have 2 board members who have been definitely involved. We have a board member over here who says that we've done all we can do. We have a board member over here who says we can do more. And so what we're collectively saying is we're going to take another bite at the apple for 3 months. So we all on one accord. But we're not going to say the staff hadn't been just started working on this. They've been working on this since 2021.
And my other question, kind of logistically, I guess for Brad and maybe the folks that have, with this extension of time that we will get from DEQ, what are we going to do different in the next 4 or 5 months that y'all didn't do in the past couple months? Like, is there a game plan, or do you need time to figure out a game plan so we'll know what's going to happen before you come back to us on February 1st?
I think we'll probably have to come up with a game plan.
Okay. Once you figure that out, can you get us a memo of what the plan is on trying to resolve whatever the issues are? I mean, I know sometimes
Yes, sir.
You have another conversation, it can work. Maybe it's a different group of people.
Right.
I don't know what we need to do to get where we're trying to go.
Yeah, and our staff and the consultant, we have wanted to, we've wanted to compromise. We don't want to be a detriment to development. That's not our intention at all. Where will we be at a different point in 3 months than we are right now?
You don't know.
I don't know. I mean, because we've met about this, and we think that we're at our point that if we go any lower, we're playing the same song again.
Okay.
But we will always try.
Well, I appreciate that, and that's what I was trying to get at. I mean, obviously, if we can get more time, you always take more time, in my opinion.
Yes, sir.
But what's going to happen during that time, and I get you saying TBD, and once y'all figure out a game plan, you'll let us know what y'all are going to do to try to be determined. So thank you, Director Jordan.
Thank you.
That's all, Mayor.
Director Miller?
Thanks, Mayor. I mean, I'm listening to this conversation, trying to soak it all in about deadlines and laws and things that we have to meet. I'd love for our city council to weigh in, just to give us some thoughts from a legal standpoint. I mean, you've heard all this discussion, Tom. I mean, what do we have to do? Where are we with regard to having to have this thing done? I mean, we're talking about extensions and everything, but I want to hear from the city council on this.
It happened. Okay. You know, the first thing I'd say is I'm glad that we've been told that we'll get the extension, but I've learned from painful experience that until you have the extension, you don't have it. So I think that decision needs to be made quickly. And I don't know how quickly it can be made, but what I'm recommending is we seek it this week and hopefully can report next Tuesday night that it's been granted, or we have the assurance it will be granted. That's one thing. The second question I've got deals with, I've got a man I respect highly who is taking over a difficult division, and he says, I think we've done everything. And I've got a board member I respect highly is saying we're not going to have development, and I don't know where the difference is there. I think that needs to be discussed relatively quickly, at least between them, so that the board can have, here are the types of issues we are concerned about. And because I don't think we need to say, let's get 3 more months and come back in February and nobody know that whole time what is it that we're coming back for or why we're coming back. That then gets you to the question of, well, if we know we're going to come back, do we sit down here today and go through this in some detail and ask questions and then have a clean conversation in February, or do we get this set up now and say, here's where we're going to look, here's what we're interested in, and we've got the extension, and now we've got more or less a roadmap of where we're going to go, a roadmap that can change as you're going, but at least you know where you're headed before you start out.
And with the council saying that, again, the pleasure of the board, what I would suggest, and again, we don't have to do this, we're going to do an extension. We've had 2 board members who played intimate roles in this process because their constituents reached out to them and they want to be a part of the process. We agreed to that, had separate meetings where the chamber was involved. Director Wyrick's been involved, Director Hines been involved. We can go through this process today and have the presentation, A. B, we can schedule a meeting with a presentation with Director Hines, because what I'm hearing from Director Wyrick is that she's been with most of it, and what I've heard sometimes in this situation, many directors want to kind of get some gleaning, some information from someone who's paid a lot more detail to it. So we got those 3 options. Pleasure of the board, we can go right now. I do know you all are scheduled for a meeting at 5:30 or upon adjournment of this meeting. What's your pleasure? Director Wyatt?
I would like for our contractor to come forward with this stormwater manual update that he's prepared. And I think it will help answer some of Lance's questions. And then whatever's left over, then that's what we need to work on. But it's pretty comprehensive, I believe, and I think it'll show where we started and where we are right now today. And I think that'll be helpful to Lance.
Fine with me. Let's get it going. Director Hines?
I mean, I get where Director Phillips is coming from, and, you know, I think it would be good for everybody to see where we are now, where we come through, then when we get there. I mean, I don't think it's a waste of time. I need to be informed. I need to be in front of these guys to be able to ask some questions. And I'll try to keep it brief. But I think to find the understanding of what's going on, we probably should be informed. I also understand the rationale that if they're going to go in and change it, why are we going through this, the motions of listening to this right now? But I think it would help for us to be informed, to see what they think the compromises are. And I can tell you, compromise is a funny thing. And I think Tom and Director Phillips would understand as their attorneys. I can tell you what I think compromise is. Compromise is you have a meeting, you get together, you come back, and then the group that had the meeting, you throw out a proposal and say, this is what we think we can do on a compromise. What do you think about it? A compromise is not, here's what our compromise is, take it or leave it. That's not a compromise. And that's what I feel like a little bit of this is, but I want to listen and hear, because like I said, we just got this today. I sent it to the stakeholders I've been talking to. This is the first they've seen of it today. So part of that is the curing process to let us digest information and see, and they may very well come back and see, but the initial knee-jerk reaction I got is, this isn't compromise. So that's why I'm telling you, and I've been paying close attention to this, and to me, the impacts are, what if we have somebody that wants to redevelop more than an acre in downtown Little Rock? Is that covered under, I mean, there's some valid questions. Is that covered? Or are we going to put a different standard on new development than we have on redevelopment any place in the city? Both are equally important to the growth of the city. And so that's the question. And from a playing amateur attorney, when you do not treat parties fairly, then you get into arbitrary and capricious. And if you're going to treat two groups that are both doing development, it's essentially new construction, one's just infill development. It's still the same process. It still impacts water quality. To say that one applies to one because it's new development and the other one because it's not, to me, doesn't seem in my logical mind like it meets that test. But I'm interested to hear the presentation. Thank you.
All right, Emily, if you'll share with that we'll just plan for us to be there at 6:30, not 5:30. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. I believe you guys have received all these slides on this presentation. So just to begin with our timeline, we really got started in January of 2023, and our first public meetings were held in May of 2023, and we've continually tried to engage the public throughout this entire process. So through our stakeholder meetings over the last couple of weeks, we have come to some compromises. The vast majority that I'm going to discuss, we agreed upon, came to a consensus on, and there's a couple that we were unable to come to a consensus on, and I'll explain a little bit more on why that is. So first off was the hydrology methodology, and this is in regards to detention and how much volume of detention does a site need to detain. So we originally had it that you could use the modified rational up to 20 acres. Through discussion, we've changed that up to 40 acres. And, you know, our rationale is that increasing this acre threshold will reduce the required detention volumes while still providing sufficient downstream flood protection. And then we're also allowing, when water is just being passed through the site, to use the same methodology that the systems were designed for in the past. This is a pretty technical item. Really, you'll just simplify the calculations, and this was a consensus compromise. This is another one that we spoke a lot with the stakeholders and also with Public Works on reducing the maximum, or increasing the maximum cross slope on streets. So allowing that on residential streets will reduce the number of stormwater inlets that need to be installed on a site, reducing some site cost. And then, you know, making sure that for those collector streets, Public Works still gets to take a look at those and make sure that it's not going to have any detrimental impact to the public. On drainage easements, our original minimum drainage easement width was 20 feet. We decreased that down to 15 feet. And that was also a discussion essentially with Public Works, just to make sure that they have sufficient access for maintenance. And we all agreed upon that compromise as well. For channel side slopes, the original manual required a maximum side slope of 3-to-1 on channels. We changed that to allow steeper side slopes, especially in sites where we have constraints based on the topography, as long as there's proper slope stabilization practices. And then for roadside ditches, it's still going to be at 3-to-1, and that's just for vehicular safety. For stormwater detention, originally we were going to require the analysis of the 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100-year storm events. We cut that back down to only 3 storm events, the 2-year, the 25, and the 100. So reducing the number of the events analyzed is going to reduce the engineering analysis cost, and also will reduce the review time, hopefully speed up those review processes. And these 3 storm events sufficiently cover the range of why we're providing detention in the first place. That smaller storm helps protect our streams from erosion. That middle storm, that's what we're designing most of our inlets and storm pipes to. And then a 100-year storm is to really protect us existing property from downstream flooding impacts. And then this one was just in regards to what software is able to be used. Originally, we just clarified that multiple software can be used as long as it has the correct capabilities, provide flexibilities for the engineers to use what they already have or what they're familiar and comfortable with. And really that's pretty much it about that one. For water quality, so this is the other item that we compromised on, but weren't able to come to a full agreement on. Originally, we were requiring a water quality treatment volume of 1.5 inches, which is the 90th percentile storm. So we've dropped that back down to the 80th percentile storm, which is 1.05 inches. So that's cutting it by about 33%. So reducing this volume of water will reduce the size and cost of the stormwater control measures for water quality. But we believe that ADEQ and EPA will still accept this as meeting the requirements of our MS4 permit. And we'll discuss that a little bit later. And then in the original manual on what constitutes redevelopment and when, or what needs to be treated if there is a redevelopment site. Originally, it didn't really specify that language. And so we clarified that to establish that if you're redeveloping a site, you only have to provide water quality for the area that you're modifying. We didn't want to hinder redevelopment by someone coming in, modifying a very small piece of their property, and now requiring water quality for the entire property. So it's really just for anything that is being modified. So we still get a water quality benefit without hopefully hindering any development on those redevelopment projects. So this is the summary of essentially the major changes. The two red ones are the ones that we adjusted it, but we weren't able to come to a full consensus. So that was that runoff methodology. Yes.
No, just real quick, so the right side are the compromises, the left side is what we had originally?
Correct, yes. Yep, so originally we had the modified rational and the SCS method. That threshold was 20 acres. We jumped that up to 40 acres and then allowed off-site flows to use the rational method as before in the existing manual. And then the detention, we cut it back from 6 storms to 3. The water quality, we cut it back from 1.5 inches down to just 1.05. And then the rest of those are all design related items. So we cut the minimum easement width down to 15 feet, increase the max cross slopes for residential streets up to 3%, and then we allowed steeper side slopes for channels.
Gonna let them go through. Let's let them go through the presentation because we'll keep going back and forth. Direct. They is a group. I mean,
Stakeholder, 3 engineering stakeholders.
who are the 3? Just so get that all out there.
Jim Daters, Joe White, and Brian Dale. And then,
2 engineering firms, 3 engineers.
we had the 2 contractors there, we had city staff there, and I was there.
Yeah. So two private engineers, 3 private engineers.
Two companies, 3 engineers. There's 3 engineers.
But they're all engineers.
Correct. All right.
Right.
They are the private engineers.
Yeah, so essentially the development community. Both of these firms do a lot of development here in Little Rock. So the 2 items that we were not able to come to a complete consensus on, that was water quality and then the runoff methodology. So I'm going to get in a little bit into the details on both of those items and why we feel like we've pretty much gone as far as we possibly can, and with still meeting the requirements of the state. So on water quality, our MS4 permit, it tells us that we have to reduce to the maximum extent practicable the discharge of pollutants from areas of new development and significant redevelopment. So ADEQ tells us we have to do this. It doesn't tell us exactly how to do this. So we looked at guidance on how do we meet this requirement of reducing to the maximum extent practicable. So we took a look at the small MS4 general permit. So any city that is pretty much smaller than Little Rock, within the state of Arkansas at least, all the other cities are required to meet this small MS4 permit. And in that permit, it states that the criteria has to be at least as stringent as the general stormwater construction permit. And so in that general construction permit, it says that there's a goal of removing at least 80% of total suspended solids for water quality. So now we've essentially established like we can't be less stringent than that requirement. So how do we meet that 80% removal goal? To get to that 80% removal goal, we took a look at the EPA model guidance on that. And so they essentially list 4 options on how to, 4 different mechanisms that you could use to get to that 80% goal. So essentially option 1, it's requiring a standard volume of stormwater runoff to be treated. So if you treat 1 inch of runoff, we don't tell you how you treat it, but you have to treat it. And so, you know, the advantage of that one, it's very straightforward. The disadvantage is the burden of proof on that pollutant removal is now on the designer. And then, so they have to prove, hey, what we are telling you or how we're treating that volume meets the 80% removal. So it leads to longer review process and more work for that design engineer. Option 2 is the same thing. You require a standard volume of stormwater to be treated, and then you also list, you have to pick from a list of acceptable practices. So as long as you pick from this list, you're presumed to be in compliance. And then the disadvantage is that you might not achieve the desired reduction for some pollutants, but for the majority of pollutants, it's going to meet what you want. So this is the option essentially that we're doing. So in the implementation of the manual, that's the standard volume of stormwater we're requiring to be treated is at 1.05 inches. And then the list of acceptable practices is in that Appendix C, which outlines the design, construction, and maintenance of all those different stormwater control measures. Option 3 from the EPA ordinances is to require the calculation of pre and post development. So you have to calculate the pollutant loads and then design a system of treatments that will meet that load reduction target. So this is something that I've done down in Florida, and some communities require that. It's the advantage is that it's the most targeted at removing the specific pollutants that you want to remove. The disadvantage is by far the most intensive process, both for the designer and the reviewer, and probably requires more staffing to implement that. And then option 4 is the same as option 3, except they're also adding in a stormwater offset fee, and those fees are used to fund existing projects for existing development to treat runoff from existing development. So looking through those options, we went with option 2 as it's the most, probably one of the easier ones to implement and does not put an undue burden on the development community. And then the rational method. So the other option that we were looking at is where do we cut off that calculation difference between a modified rational and an SCS method or other methods to calculate the volume of water that's being detained. So we looked at a bunch of different manuals. Georgia Stormwater Manual says you can use the modified rational up to 5 acres. The city of Bryant doesn't allow the use of the modified rational. So if you are designing detention, they require you to use the SCS method or other unit hydrograph methods. The city of Conway allows it for up to 25 acres, and then that the rational method can only be used for peak flow. So designing your culverts or your stormwater inlets, stuff like that. So here's a table of some both local or in-state cities and also some regionally. And as you can see, essentially what we're proposing is the least stringent in regards to which methodology we're allowing to be used. And so, any way that you look at it, we're going to be increasing the amount of volume being stored compared to what we're doing currently. However, as you can see, none of these other manuals allow the rational method, which is what we're currently using, to be used because the rational method, when it was designed as a methodology, was not built, it was built for peak flow only. It was not built for volume. So if you look at the amount of volume that's generated based on the rational method, the modified rational, the SCS, there's a very wide difference in those. And you're just not accurately portraying what the actual reality is. So to use anything less than what we proposed would not to be accurately reflect reality and essentially be putting our downstream properties at flooding risk. So I guess with that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Director Phillips.
All right. Thank you again for the presentation. And I have a few just to make sure that I understand as we go through this process over the next, I guess, 5 months now. Number one, on this screen that we're looking at, if I heard you correctly, the two graphs or graphics that are red are the ones where you met with that group of developers and engineers, and there's a disagreement about what it should be. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, that's correct. Those are the two items that we couldn't fully come to a unanimous consent on that one.
Right, but detention and design, everyone's on the same page with those two?
Correct.
Okay, understood. And to make sure I'm clear, what you just went through with the different methodologies, that's just relates to the runoff methodology on how to control the stormwater runoff, correct?
Correct.
And we're just gonna keep doing what we've been doing and using the rational method. Am I understanding that correctly?
So currently we're using the rational method up to 200 acres. The proposal would be to use for peak flow only. So if you're calculating the size of a culvert or an inlet, you can use the rational method. But if you're sizing detention, then you'd have to use the modified rational up to 40 acres.
Okay.
And above that, you'd have to use the SCS method.
So what is your understanding of the disagreement of the folks that you met with and why they're not with that?
It really just comes down to how much volume will need to be provided. And essentially, the rational method was never created to be used for detention. There's no volume component in the rational method. And so what is currently being used is vastly underestimating the volume of runoff from a site. The peak flow it can be accurate, but the volume is being way underestimated using the current method.
And I understand what you're saying, just that method doesn't fit the reality of not only the peak, but the current flow, so I'm with you on that. Two other questions. The water quality, the reduction from 1.5 to 1.05, is that something that actually has to be approved by DEQ to make sure we're meeting that 80% suspended solid threshold? Or is that presumed if we do that, we do meet that requirement?
So I think that the 1.05 will need to be improved by ADEQ. But as long as they approve that number, it'd be presumed that we meet that 80%.
So theoretically, DEQ could say, hey, that's too low?
Yes, theoretically.
Okay.
So the original number that we went with was the 90th percentile. And if we look at surrounding states, a lot of them, that's what they've gone to, is that 90th percentile storm. The federal government actually has gone to the 95th percentile storm.
And we're going the other way.
Yes. But, our opinion is that treating that amount of water will still get you to that 80%, or at least the argument can be made that it would get you to that 80%.
Okay, and then my last question before I switch. I share, and I think it's a concern of his, Director Hines' concern about whether this is going to negatively impact development going forward in our city. I mean, you do this every day. In your opinion, does this have a negative impact on development going forward?
So from what we've seen in other areas that we've worked in, I think it will increase the cost. From my personal experience, I haven't had a project be canceled because of stormwater requirements. The city of Fort Smith, for example, they've had a 1-inch water quality requirement since 2014. And then they designed to the 100-year detention as well. And that's essentially most of the communities, even in Central Arkansas, have either moved that direction or are moving that direction.
And I'm sorry, I lied because I had one more question. I'm sorry, Vice Mayor. And I know we were talking about the game plan going forward, and this will be my last question. But going forward, if there are future conversations to be clear, we're only talking about runoff and water quality. That's where, if there's a gap, it's in those two buckets.
Yeah,
Okay.
everything else we've come to an agreement upon, so those are really the two that we weren't able to completely come to consensus on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Director Hines?
Thanks. Miles, so I want to clarify for something, when you start talking about 80th, 90th, and 95th percentiles, you're talking about the percentiles you get within one standard deviation or two standard deviations in the mean, correct?
No, these percentiles are actually just the rainfall that we get. This was a calculation based on rainfall data from the Little Rock Airport. And essentially we just ordered every rainfall event over the past 30 years, smallest to largest. And so the 80th percentile is the 80th.
So you didn't use a standard deviation formula to calculate that with all that data?
No, so we just used, this is the methodology that's used throughout the rest of the country on calculating those percentiles.
I'm not a PE, but I do know something when you aggregate data like that, and generally the standard to get to percentiles is usually using standard deviation. So you guys didn't use, you can't tell me did you use an average, a mean to get to that percentile? When I hear you talking about 80th percentile, in my world, from economics to marketing analysis, you always use a standard deviation because it excludes the exculpatory. And this is where it gets confusing to lay people, that if you have 90th percentile, people think 95th percentile is better. But generally what you do is when you have a 95th percentile, it encompasses everything. You don't exclude the outliers, you only take that. So that's not the methodology.
No, it's a completely different methodology. And so essentially, it's a pretty low curve until you start getting into those higher end storm events. And then as you go up, the jump from 80th to 90th is smaller than the jump from 90th to 95th. So if you were to go to 95th, that would be a bigger increase. That would be probably over. So like we went from 90th to 80th, that went down half an inch. I'm guessing that the calculation to go from the 90th to the 95th would be probably an inch.
Right. And maybe we're talking about the same thing, and I'm looking at it as a bell-shaped curve, and you're looking at it as a linear high-rise curve. But you're encompassing, when you go to 95th, you're encompassing all the biggest outliers of storms, right? You're including that 100-year event to try to capture those 100-year events over that.
Right. So the way that it was calculated is you order those storms. So your largest storms would be at that above the 95th percentile.
And I'm just getting in the weeds there. Sorry, I got distracted I want to make sure I understood what we're talking about. So when you talk about the cost of implementation of these new standards, you said you haven't seen it happen in any other places that you're doing it, but how can you roughly say that a city that doesn't have the development standards we do, what the impact, and a true apples to apples, I guess. And I guess that the reason that comes to question is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I find it interesting because I thought the last time you presented to us, you said that the smaller cities around us didn't have stormwater manuals, but yet you cite City of Bryant, City of Conway, that they do have stormwater manuals.
Yeah, so there's a lot of cities that don't have a stormwater manual. I mean, there's a few, Conway, Bryant. I believe Benton just refers to the Little Rock manual. I don't know if it's in the code, but a lot of the other surrounding communities.
I'm just curious because I thought you stood up here last time you were talking to us and said that none of those smaller cities surrounding us did, but then I see citations of it here. Just curious. I'm not going to belabor a horse. I'm not a PE, and I understand some of the impacts on this and what you guys compromises come to. I'm gonna let those. But I will say to my fellow board members, it's great when we're involved in these conversations, but I don't work daily on this. I'm not a professional engineer. Miles and Tim Daters and Joe White and Brian Dale are. I also talked to the Home Builders Association. They're very concerned. Most of the home builders rely on their PEs to tell them yay or nay. They're the arbiter of that. I think it's very important, and I'm glad we've gotten some progress. I hate that we had to go through a gnashing of teeth and pulling of hair to get us there, since we've been working on this since January of '23. But, and sometimes that progress is slow coming till the very end when people are forced to make decisions. I look forward to working with you guys and being in the room. Again, since Director Wyrick decided she wanted to be in the room, it wasn't really possible. But I've kept up with this, and having the area of the city with the greatest development as far as permits and rooftops and new development, it's concerning. The greatest concern for me is we continue to talk about it. It was in our sales tax as affordable housing. We have mandates put on us by the federal government. Our ADEQ, I think, works real well with us. But again, these are self-imposed, and we can agree to disagree on this. But what we present to ADEQ is what we're going to do. And all the previous stormwater manuals we've done, they've accepted it. And the examples of what other cities do in their stormwater manuals or their proposed permits are not nearly as stringent as some of the stuff we're proposing. So I just want to, it's not a one-size-fits-all, and that's what I want to make sure we weren't doing. And I think having a wide array of options. Now, you talked about having options on design, I guess. Is that where, have we broadened that field, whereas we were only giving 2 of the 20 options that were available, or was that on the options for the, I guess, the water quality?
Yeah, so I think in our water quality in that Appendix C, I can't remember the exact number, but there's, I think, around 16 to 20 options listed, and then it also lists proprietary devices. So like, pre-built devices from Contech or ADS or something like that. And so those would also be acceptable, as long as they have the backing to show that they meet their criteria.
Okay. So Brad, Miles, I'm going to send you, I've got our contract for professional services, and there are some deliverables in this contract that I would like to see proof of work on. So I will email a copy of this with the areas circled, and I'd like to see production of those documents to us that were in the deliverables. So I'll send that over in the morning. Trying to think if there's anything else. I appreciate it, Miles, and you may get caught in the crossfire of this. I know it's a tough job when you're dealing with demands of a staff and then a political body that has constituents we have to answer to. So please don't take this as any personal animus, just me trying to make sure that we're not shooting ourselves in the proverbial foot going forward.
Understood.
Thank you, Director Hines. Thank you, Miles. I don't see any additional questions at this time. If there are none, we will adjourn.
Thank you.